They say some places never forget the cries in the walls, the names scratched into stone, and the shadows that move when no one's watching. Tonight we open the gates to a place soaked in blood, fear, and something older than death. Welcome to the old jail, where the inmates never left, and neither might you. And if you're new to the video, make sure to like it, subscribe to the British Hauntings channel, and don't forget to turn on the bell icon. Let's begin the video. The air inside the old jail was thick with the weight of centuries, damp, stale, and humming with something else. Jake tightened his grip on the K2 meter. "This," the guide whispered, "is where they kept the worst of the worst, the ones who never left." Jake scoffed. A skeptic by nature, he'd signed up for the old jail after dark tour as a joke, a dare from his buddies after one too many beers. But now, standing in the maximum security wing, the joke felt hollow. The walls here were scarred with scratches, deep grooves, like frantic fingers had clawed for escape. The guide pointed to the far corner of the solitary confinement cell, a pitch-black void even their flashlights couldn't penetrate. "They say if you sit there long enough, something sits with you." Laughter rippled through the group, but Jake's throat went dry. He'd heard the stories, the hangings, the torture, the inmates who'd rotted in their own filth. 8 men had swung from the gallows outside, their deaths drawn out by miscalculated rope lengths. Others had succumbed to disease, their bodies dumped in unmarked graves. The jail's cruelty was legendary. Sheriff Perry's coiled rope, the starvation, the buckets of human waste passed between cells. "Who's brave enough to try?" the guide taunted. Jake's pride won out. He stepped into the cell, the cold seeping through his sneakers like groundwater. As he lowered himself into the corner, the laughter outside faded. The air turned icy, then pressure. A presence, dense and hungry, pressed against his chest. The K2 meter screamed, its lights blazing red. Something moved in the blackness. A shape darker than the shadows peeled itself from the wall. It had no face, just a smudge of malice, but Jake felt its grin. The stories rushed back. The crawler, the thing that slithered across ceilings. Fingers brittle and cold brushed his neck. The smell hit him next, sewage and sickly sweet decay, the stench of the unburied. Jake bolted, knocking over the spirit box in his rush. Behind him, the device crackled to life, a voice slicing through the static. "Stay." The group outside erupted in screams as the door slammed shut on its own. When they pried it open, Jake was gone. Only his phone remained, its camera roll filled with photos of the empty cell, each one showing a shadowy hand reaching for his shoulder. The tour group's laughter died the moment the heavy iron door of the maximum security cell clanged shut behind them. Only the flickering glow of their flashlights cut through the oppressive darkness. "This," whispered the guide, her voice trembling, "is where they broke the ones who wouldn't obey." The air reeked of rust, mildew, and something worse, a sickly sweet stench like molasses boiling over a flame. Though no stove had burned here for decades, among the group, Sarah clutched her EMF meter, its lights spiking erratically. She'd signed up for the old jail after dark tour as research for her paranormal podcast, but now the stories felt too real. The guide pointed to a rusted stockade in the corner, its wood stained dark. They'd lock prisoners in here for days. Some never came out alive. A cold spot thickened around Sarah's ankles, as if invisible fingers were testing their grip. Then the whispers began. At first they were faint, a garbled murmur beneath the static of the spirit box one guest held. Then came the laugh, a wet, guttural chuckle from the empty women's cell. The group froze. The device screeched, and a voice, clearer than any electronic distortion could explain, hissed. "Pretty thing like the others." Sarah's blood turned to ice. The guide paled. "That's new," she admitted. The stories rushed back. The female inmates rounded up on trumped-up charges, forced into servitude, or worse. The sheriff's ledger listed 12 women. Local rumors spoke of screams muffled by the 20-foot thick walls. Sarah's flashlight beam caught a shadow darting across the ceiling, a hunched figure crawling like a spider. The crawler, the guide had called it earlier, but this time it didn't vanish. It dropped. Sarah screamed as the weight hit her, knocking the breath from her lungs. The EMF meter shattered against the floor, its final burst of light illuminating a face, sunken eyes, a mouth stretched too wide before the darkness swallowed it whole. The group fled, but Sarah couldn't move. The cold seeped into her bones, the sweet stench thickening until she gagged. When they found her at dawn, she was curled in the stockade, her nails torn from clawing at the wood. Her phone lay nearby, its voice memo app still recording. The last playback was a whisper. "You'll do fine. We always need more made." Outside, the gallows rope swayed in the windless air. The sheriff's pocket watch had stopped at 3:17 a.m., the exact time the record showed when Elias Green's neck snapped during his botched hanging in 1893. Now, over a century later, the rusted timepiece sat on the warden's desk in the old jail museum, its glass cracked like the smile of the thing that watched from the rafters. Ryan, the night security guard, adjusted his flashlight beam. He'd taken the job for the quiet. Ryan froze. The voice wasn't dispatch. It was Sheriff Perry's drawl, clear as the noose displays in the gift shop. Then the dragging started. Something heavy moved in cell block C, where Elias Green had spent his last night scratching psalms into the stone. Ryan's flashlight died. The backup generator hummed to life, casting strobe-like flashes down the hallway. In the flicker, a figure emerged. Tall, his neck bent at that angle, the one from the autopsy photos. "Ain't finished." The voice came from everywhere, the walls vibrating with it. The museum's replica noose began uncoiling itself, slithering across the floor like a snake. Ryan bolted for the exit, but the heavy oak door slammed shut. The gallows trapdoor groaned open downstairs. When morning shift arrived, they found Ryan's uniform neatly folded on the warden's desk, the sheriff's watch ticking again, and swinging gently from the replica gallows, a rope still damp with sweat. The antique armoire in the jail's infirmary was always cold to the touch, even in the sweltering Florida summers. Tour guides joked it was the best AC in St. Augustine, but the docents knew better. They'd all heard the giggling. Megan, the newest night watchman, learned this, her first week on duty. The sound came just past midnight, 3 knocks from inside the carved oak wardrobe. Megan's flashlight beam trembled as she approached. "You're not funny, Dave," she called out to the empty jail, praying it was her co-worker messing with her. A child's whisper floated through the wood. "But I'm not Dave." The armoire door creaked open on its own. Inside, the small shelf, historically used to store medical supplies, was empty, except for a single porcelain doll, missing an eye. Its remaining glass eye reflected something. Moving behind Megan, cold fingers brushed her wrist. She spun around to see a girl in a tattered 19th century dress, her face half-shadowed by the moonlight, streaming through barred windows. The smell of camphor and spoiled milk filled the air. "Will you play with me?" the girl asked, her voice like rustling pages in an old book. The others always stopped playing. Megan's radio suddenly blared static. When the noise cleared, a chorus of children's voices whispered, "Run!" She didn't need telling twice. The next morning, maintenance found the armoire door ripped from its hinges. Scratches covered the interior. Not random marks, but counting tallies. Exactly 117 marks. Records show that between 1895 and 1909, 117 children passed through the jail's infirmary. Only 116 ever left. The hurricane siren wailed like a dying prisoner as rain lashed the old jail's barred windows. Tour guide Marco had stayed behind to secure the building, but the storm had other plans. The power died at midnight, plunging the jail into a darkness so thick it felt alive. Not the usual ghostly murmurs Marco was used to. This was a chorus. The voices of men, women, and children rose from the walls, their words twisting into a single demand: "Let us out!" The air reeked of molasses and rust, the stench of the jail's darkest days. A crash echoed from the gallows yard. Marco's flashlight beam revealed the replica noose swinging violently, though the wind had gone still. The rope wasn't empty. 8 shadowy figures dangled, their necks bent at unnatural angles. The same 8 men hanged here between 1891 and 1953. Their feet twitched, as if still fighting for breath. Inside the jail, breathed. Cell doors slammed shut on their own. The armoire in the infirmary rattled its wood, splintering as tiny hands punched from within. The spirit box Marco had left on the warden's desk erupted with overlapping screams. "Noose too short! They're in the walls! She crawls!" Figures materialized in the cells. Emaciated men with hollow eyes. Women in tattered dresses clawing at their throats. The crawler oozed from the ceiling, its form shifting between a shadow and something with too many joints. Behind it, Sheriff Perry's massive specter loomed, his coiled whip cracking though his hands were gone. The storm outside reached a crescendo as the jail's front doors burst open. A tidal surge of black water rushed in, carrying with it the bones of inmates dumped in unmarked graves. The flood receded as suddenly as it came, leaving behind a single artifact on the floor. Sheriff Perry's ledger, its pages now scribbled with fresh names, including Marco's. At dawn, rescue crews found the jail intact. No flood damage, no broken doors. But the gallows rope had frayed clean through, and the armoire stood wide open, its interior walls gouged with 118 tally marks. The scent of candle wax always lingered in the warden's quarters, though no flame had burned there in decades. Tour guides joked it was Mrs. Perry's ghost still tidying up, but the night cleaners knew better. They'd all seen the shadow in the rocking chair. Lena, the newest historian hired to archive the jail's records, learned this her first evening alone with the ledgers. The rocking chair in the warden's bedroom moved on its own, its rhythm slow and deliberate. Lena's pen froze mid-sentence. The jail's infamous cold spots were well documented, but the air smelled suddenly of lavender and gunpowder. A combination, the archives noted, was Sheriff Perry's wife's signature scent. Not the usual inmate moans from the cell blocks. These words were clear. Hissed between the cracks, Lena's flashlight died. The backup generator hummed to life, casting jagged shadows across the ledger she'd been studying. Sheriff Perry's personal log from 1902, the year his wife mysteriously vanished. The page she'd been transcribing now bore fresh ink, bleeding through the parchment as if written moments ago. Ellen knew too much, had to be done. The girls in cell 5 can't tell no tales now, neither. Behind Lena, the armoire door swung open, revealing a child's porcelain doll, one eye missing, its dress stained brown. It hadn't been there during the day's inventory. As she reached for it, the temperature plummeted. Frost spiderwebbed across the ledger, preserving a single new sentence beneath the sheriff's confession. A scream echoed from the women's cell block. Not a recorded ghost tour effect, but raw and present. Lena ran toward the sound, only to find cell 5's back wall crumbled away, revealing hollow brick stuffed with yellowed bone, too small to be an adult's. The stench of molasses and decay choked the air. When security found Lena at dawn, she was scrubbing the warden's floors with frantic strokes, her nails cracked and bleeding. "Have to clean before he sees," she muttered. The ledgers were neatly stacked, Sheriff Perry's confession page torn out, and in the rocking chair, a single candle, its wax still warm. The rope should have rotted away decades ago, yet every full moon, the hangman's noose in the old jail courtyard tightened itself into a fresh knot. Groundskeepers would arrive at dawn to find the hemp fibers damp with dew or something thicker. Tyler, a paranormal investigator, came to document the phenomenon. He set up infrared cameras facing the gallows, not believing the legends, until the footage started rolling at 2:17 a.m. Not from wind. There was none. The noose cinched tight around empty air, the fibers straining as if bearing invisible weight. Tyler's EMF detector spiked as something heavy dropped through the trapdoor. The wooden platform shook with the impact of unseen feet, just as the records described. Elias Green's prolonged 1893 execution. Then the whispering started, not from Tyler's spirit box, but from the very beams of the gallows. Wrong calculations. The drop should have been 9 feet. Sheriff Perry knew. The camera's thermal imaging flashed cold as a shadowy figure materialized beneath the dangling noose. Not one, but 8 overlapping silhouettes. On the trapdoor lever, the distinct shape of Sheriff Perry's hat. The jail's underground tunnels had been sealed since 1953, but tonight the iron gate hung open. A damp, earthy smell mixed with the metallic tang of blood wafted up from the darkness. The spirits had been restless all week, more active than any paranormal investigator had ever recorded. It was as if they knew what was coming. Dr. Lillian Cross adjusted her headlamp and descended the crumbling stone steps, her boots splashing in stagnant water. She wasn't supposed to be here. The tunnels were structurally unsound, but after a decade researching the jail's darkest secrets, she couldn't ignore the final clue. Sheriff Perry's personal diary, hidden behind a loose brick in his old office. The beam of her light caught something on the tunnel wall. Names, dozens of them, scratched into the stone by desperate fingers. Some were so old they'd nearly faded. Others looked disturbingly fresh. The air grew colder as she moved deeper, her breath fogging in front of her. Then she heard it, the sound of weeping. A woman in a tattered Victorian dress knelt in the shadows, her shoulders shaking. Lillian's pulse spiked. It was Ellen Perry, the warden's vanished wife. The spirit lifted her head, her hollow eyes streaming black tears. "He made me watch," she whispered. "The girls from Cell 5, the men who knew too much, even the children, they're all here." Her skeletal hand pointed to the tunnel's end, where the walls gave way to a sunken pit. Lillian's light revealed bones, far more than should have been possible. Femurs, skulls, tiny rib cages, all piled carelessly like firewood. The temperature plummeted, shadows detached from the walls. The crawler, the gallows 8, the little girl from the armoire. They circled her, not threatening, but waiting. Ellen reached out her fingers, brushing Lillian's recorder. "Tell them," she begged. "Tell them all." Then the spirits rushed forward, not to harm, but to show. Visions exploded in Lillian's mind, the sheriff's ledger burning as prisoners screamed behind locked doors, the gallows rope snapping, only for another noose to appear, the warden's wife strangled with her own lavender scarf. When rescuers found Lillian at dawn, she was sitting in the tunnel, surrounded by bones arranged in careful rows. Her recorder was still running, filled with hours of sobbing confessions, none of them in her